Hi, welcome to Whispering Pines Farm's YouTube channel. My name is Jennifer Johnson, and I raise sheep for their wool. In this video, we're in my basement of my home, which is where all my wool crafting takes place, and it's also where my office is, where I work at my laptop and do all my business. But the reason I wanted to do this video was to share with you my progress with Susan's neck wool. So in my skirting video where I was skirting Susan's fleece, who is a more at you in our flock, I was so enchanted with her wool that I decided that I wanted to process the neck wool from her fleece. So her fleece under the coat is going into my fleece auction. But the neck does not go into the fleece auction. And it was a lighter color moret, so I probably could have put it in my fawn comb top pool of wool. But there was something about it, I just felt that I had to process it. And I've been watching her for a long time, that neck. When she walks around in the barn with a full fleece with the coat on, it's just, there's so much wool there and it's just captivating. So what I did was I took that neck wool, didn't weigh it, unfortunately, in hindsight. Probably would have been a good idea. But I washed it just as if it were a fleece. So I put it in my fleece bag that I use to wash full fleeces and put a small amount of laundry soap in my utility tub, maybe like 3 inches deep, of very hot water, the hottest setting on my tap. And then soaked it, just kind of gently squished it down into the water, the soapy water. Soaked it for 15 minutes, and I do this with my timer on my watch. Otherwise, I'll just never get it done because I keep on forgetting. So I set my timer, so that's why I know it's 15 minutes in the soap. Then I let it drain, so I put it on a rack that I can suspend on top of the utility tub, and the wool just sits there and just, by gravity, just drains. It doesn't completely dry, but there's enough the water comes out that it's suitable for what I need. Then I spray out all the dirty water that's pooled at the bottom of the utility tub, put in more hot soapy water, and do it usually 3 times is enough, where I'm looking at the water after I pull out the fiber and it's not really dirty. It's always going to be a little dirt, and I never really take it to perfectly crystal clear water because I'm going to be rinsing it, because then I'll do 3 rinses of, again, very hot water with no soap. And then I'm also going to be washing the yarn once I've spun it up. So I figure by the time, and then when you make something and you block it, you're going to wash it one more time. So after I've finished the 3 rinses, then I put it in my laundry machine. So I've got a really old washing machine, and someone told me at a festival recently that you can't access your spin cycle like you could with the older machines. So they've got them safety featured to prevent you from being able to get at it, I guess. But I can put the wool in the laundry tub, run really hot water in there, a rinse cycle. Not a rinse cycle, but I'm running hot water into the tub in order to rinse the yarn for the final time, or the fiber, I mean. Then after it's soaked for 15 minutes, then I hit the spin button on the washing machine, and the fiber just spins in the tub. And after that is done, then it is pretty dry. If you hold it up, nothing is dripping out. So then at that point, I lay it out on a screen on my back porch, and here in the summer, it doesn't take long at all for it to dry. So then once it was dry, there was still flecks of hay and VM in the fleece because it's neck wool, so it's not covered by a coat. Fortunately, Susan is a fairly tall ewe, so there wasn't as much as if she were shorter, because the sheep kind of eat over top of each other and hay falls into their neck wool. So after it was dry, I think it took a couple days before I was actually able to get to it. And I started flicking it, and I didn't have any intention for what I wanted to make. And I knew I was just going to make yarn and then offer the yarn in my booth to hand knitters. because I knew I wanted to spin it. So I started flicking, and I noticed there was some color variation throughout the neck wool, and it wasn't really as noticeable until after I started flicking it. So there were some very, very light portions and some darker, not as many, not as much volume, but some enough darker pieces that I just decided that I had to make what I call a gradient yarn, where it goes from light to very dark. So in order to do that, I had to flick everything first, which is hard because right now, for example, I'm working on a Morat fleece. It's all the same color, so I can start spinning before I finish flicking. That way I get kind of to enjoy both of those activities. But when I make a gradient yarn, I really have to finish all of the flicking. And I use my Magicraft flicker, and I have not changed my method that I've been using for years and years, where I flick, I'll hold on to the base of the lock first. There's no rhyme or reason for this. I think it's because it's easier for me to grab the base and get a good handhold on it. Then I'll flick the tip, the lock, flip it around in my hand, grab the tip, and then flick the base. And then I have a beautiful flicked lock ready to spin. So after I got them all flicked, I separated them out into 4 different shade classes. So I had a small amount of dark, some medium dark, some medium, and some light, I think were the 4 classifications. So I broke it up into those groups and really tried to just include in each of those locks that were of very similar color. So what ended up happening was the group of dark brown, I didn't have as much as I did of the medium. So that's okay. So then I took those 4 piles, 4 color classes, and weighed them and split them evenly in half. So I ended up with 8 piles of locks, flicked locks, going from dark to very light. Then what I did, so I took the 4 of one, the dark, medium, dark, medium, and light, took those 4, set them aside. Then I took the light of the other half and started to spin that. So at the base, at the closest to the core of my bobbin was the lightest color. And I always do that with the color I have the most of. So I had a lot of very light and not very much of the very dark. So the reason I do that is so that when it's time to ply, the very dark is at the top of the bobbin, and you know that they're going to match up, and you're going to get a good quantity of that. Whereas if you started with the one you have a lot of, chances are, once you finally get to the end, which is what happened, I had quite a bit of yardage left of the very light at the end of the bobbin, and I didn't have enough of the dark to be able to risk not being able to use it. Hopefully that makes sense. So I started to spin. So what I did was I took that first of the 4 color shades, the very light, and I just lay it out on a table. It's really fiddly, but it's so worth it. So I just laid it out on the table and looked at the locks and kind of organized them from very light to very dark. And then I use these cardboard packaging. Now, stuff comes now in these weird shapes. They look like weird cityscapes or something. And I like to use those. So I put I just grabbed like the first row of the lightest in that group of light and started to spin it. And then just kind of gradually work my way through all the flicked locks. And after I finished the first of the 4 color classes and went to the medium, I did the same thing. I laid it out on the table and just started spinning. So did that with 2 bobbins. So Susan's wool is pretty fine. I was using my really old rose wheel, which had I think it's got a little gem. It was the little gem whirl. I put it on set at the 9.6 to 1 ratio, which was the second largest groove on the pulley. I was using my standard E-flyer, which is my preferred flyer. It has ceramic inserts in the orifice, the guide, and the let me think about this for a second. The flyer hook has a closed ceramic orifice. So the fiber just glides by and it doesn't wear any grooves or anything in the metal, which is a problem for me. And spun it how it wanted to be spun. You know, I'm not really a good, deliberate, intentional spinner. Much of the time, the fiber spins the way it wants to. And I only spin my sheep's wool. Because the only reason I learned how to spin was because I had the sheep first. I wanted to learn how to spin their wool so that I could have their wool made into yarn. I was a knitter first, and then we got the sheep, and then I started to spin their yarn. So she spun up really fine. But the thing that was cool that I really enjoyed about it, when I do gradients on catmuggets, the color goes from light to dark really quickly. There's not a lot, for the most part. Well, there's a couple fleeces that I've got in my auction where they've got little patches of variation. So this isn't for all of them, but for most of them, you know, you have the light and then it goes dark really fast. So the only transition gray or fawn that you have is just where those two colors meet. But what was fun about Susan's was there was a lot of each shade. So the shift is so subtle that it's possible I won't be able to even present it on the camera. I hope you can see it. Now, when I tied these skeins up, they were really loose. Now she bloomed quite a bit, so I'm going to have to retie them because I'm nervous that I might cause like a kink in the yarn. And you know, as with most of our yarns, she's not super duper crimpy, but there is quite a bit of bounce and spring with this. So I ended up with her neck wool getting 4.56 ounces of washed yarn. So after I plied it, I washed it once with a teensy bit of soap and then rinsed it once and hung it to dry without a weight. I never weight my yarns when I hang them to dry. So I ended up with 4.56 ounces of yarn, which weirdly the numbers are similar, but I came up with 454 yards of yarn. So I suppose what I could have done had I weighed it and was thinking clearly, I probably could have made 2 gradient skeins of yarn instead of one enormous one. But this is what I ended up with. I love it. I feel like it looks like some sort of beautiful velour stole. So I just wanted to share this with you, just to kind of show how you can really make very, very special things from the wool from a sheep, from their fleeces. So thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this little video, and I hope you can come back soon.